All right, this is your study guide for Chapter 8 and Chapter 9. As you can see here, I have four boxes. Each one is going to cover a couple of different topics or categories. We'll start with the big stuff. Main ideas, concepts, and themes of the two chapters. So if you remember way back when, the very beginning of Chapter 8 started with the reform movements, and so reform means to it's an attempt to improve something, change something for the better. The second big theme here that we want to talk about is abolition. This would be the immediate end to slavery. The factory system. So we saw with 8.4, the change of the workforce. We saw a change from the cottage industry to the factory system, where things or places are dedicated to the mass production of a certain product. In this case, it would be the textile industry, the process of changing cotton into cloth. The fourth major theme or concept that we want to look at is capitalism. This is dealing with a market revolution. Capitalism is when a private entity or a private individual owns all the factors of production. Manifest destiny and expansion and conflict kind of all go into um, the same hand. Manifest destiny, remember, is that it is America's destiny or purpose to expand from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. The belief that God wants them to expand and gain territory. But with expansion, as you looked at with your timelines and spectrum activities, also comes it also comes conflict. We see this with the Native Americans, and we also see this as well with the Mexican-American War. Um, going from left to right, we look at key people and groups. So starting with the reform movements, Charles G. Finney. Charles G. Finney was the leader or the most noted individual for the Second Great Awakening. If you remember, the Second Great Awakening was this revival or rebirth in religion in America in the first quarter of the 1800s. So Charles G. Finney was going around and in the upstate part of New York, or what would become known as the burned over district, and he would lead these revivals or camp meetings where people would have intense periods of emotional preaching, Bible study, and the belief that the individual could achieve salvation, and also the individual could better society around them. So Charles G. Finney led this whole idea of the Second Great Awakening, the revivalist movement in upstate New York. Once again, the belief that the individual, if they choose to accept Christianity, they could gain salvation. They are responsible for gaining salvation. No longer is the belief that their lives have been predestined for them. The second two people, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. Emerson is the leader of the Transcendentalist movement, the belief that truth comes from within, comes from this inner conscious or this inner light, and also comes from observation through of nature. Um, Ralph Waldo Emerson also had the idea of self-reliance, that is up to the individual to find truth. Henry David Thoreau was also a transcendentalist. Thoreau is going to come up with a idea that he takes to the Mexican-American War. He refuses to support the Mexican-American War. He believes this is a war to expand slavery, and he disagrees with slavery. So he refuses to pay taxes that would support this war. This is known as civil disobedience, when you protest something that you disagree with or laws that you disagree with in a nonviolent way, but willing to accept any consequences or punishments that may be handed down from knowingly breaking the law. Gandhi is going to practice civil disobedience, and then Martin Luther King will also practice civil disobedience. Next on the list, Sojourner Truth. She is a women's rights advocate and an abolitionist. Most famous or noteworthy speech is "Ain't I a Woman," where she tackles both the problems or the plight of being a woman and a former slave. William Lloyd Garrison is a controversial abolitionist editor of the newspaper The Liberator. He advocates for immediate end to slavery. He is very aggressive. Some of you guys wrote an article pretending to be William Lloyd Garrison and talking about how evil slavery is and how it should be ended. David Walker is a free black. He believes that the African American slaves should fight for their freedom. In his pamphlet, An Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, Walker advocates fighting for their freedom if necessary. Frederick Douglass was a writer for The Liberator before him and William Lloyd Garrison ended up splitting up. Douglass is going to end up coming up with his own newspaper, his abolitionist newspaper called the North Star. Frederick Douglass was a former slave, and he advocated nonviolent means to end slavery. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott. These were the two leaders of the women's rights movement. They will hold the first women's rights convention, known as the Seneca Falls Convention, in which they will prepare a document called the Declaration of Sentiments. This is modeled after the Declaration of Independence, stating that all men and women are created equal, therefore women should be granted the right to vote. Dorothea Dix, she is responsible for advocating a reform or a change in the prison system, specifically looking at better treatment of the mentally ill. Horace Mann is the main figure in the education reform movement. He was the one that got teacher training schools, a curriculum, compulsory public school attendance. He believed that if we lived in a democracy and or republic with a voting electorate, we should be an educated populace. So Horace Mann believes the best way to educate potential voters is through the public school system. The Lowell Mill Girls, if you remember with the factory system, Francis Cabot Lowell is going to create these textile factories in Massachusetts and New England, and most of his textile mills will employ single young girls. These girls face low wages, poor working conditions, a very regimented and structured lifestyle. They will go on strike 2 times in 1834 and 1836, advocating for better pay and better working conditions. Next on the list, when we were talking about expansion out west, Joseph Smith was a leader of the Mormons. He will be killed by a mob in Illinois, and Brigham Young will take the Mormons out west on the Mormon Trail, and they will end up settling in Utah, where they can practice their religion freely. James K. Polk is the president. He wins or a president from 1844 through 48. James K. Polk is going to be the one that wins on the platform of expansion. James K. Polk will be the president during the 54-40 or Fight campaign, where we demanded, sole possession of the Oregon Territory, no more joint occupation with the British. James K. Polk will be the president who sends John Slidell down to Mexico City, where he's refused to be seen by the Mexican government. John Slidell was sent down there to offer to purchase the New Mexico and California territories. James K. Polk will be the president during the Mexican-American War. Some key events: the Sacred Great Awakening, which we've talked about, the antebellum reform movements, education, prison, the women's rights movement, the temperance movement. The temperance movement is something that we haven't talked about yet, but if you remember, the temperance movement is warning against the dangers and the evils of alcohol. So the temperance movement promoted the abstinence of alcohol. Seneca Falls Convention is with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, the first women's rights convention, advocating or promoting the women's rights to vote, or women's suffrage. The market revolution. The market revolution we talked about with the growing capitalistic economy, where now farming is going to be specialized, industry or the factory system will be booming, and you start to see Americans dependent on each other and different regions to supply goods to them. With the market revolution, we see the roads being built. We see canals connecting the East Coast, to the interior of the country. We see the steamboat is another improvement in transportation, now allowing shipments of goods to go upstream as well as downstream. We see the steamboats and the canal systems both get surpassed by railroads, which will soon blanket the Northeast and the Midwest. So the market revolution is this change in the way the economy is structured and how Americans rely, or who Americans rely on to produce goods. No longer themselves, but now other people from other regions of the country. Manifest Destiny, we went over. Texas independence. Remember, with Texas independence, we have the Mexican government wanting Americans to settle in Texas to promote trade, to protect them from the Indians from the northern provinces. There's going to be a dispute or a conflict between Santa Anna and Texans like Stephen Austin, where Stephen Austin and the Texans around 1835 are going to want some more self-government, greater self-control. They want to be able to keep their slaves, and this will lead to the Texas Revolution and then the Texas independence in 1836. Remember, Texas will be their own country from 1836 to 1845 because the United States Congress is hesitant to annex Texas, both because they know it will further sour relations between the United States and Mexico, and there is a hesitation on the northern states to allow Texas to come in as a slave state. Remember, there's a balance of power in Congress, which Americans or Congress does not want to disrupt. This will be a further source of tension, sectional tension more specifically, as we get later into the 1840s and into the 1850s. Part 8 and 9 I should talk about first. Black Hawk War and Treaty of Fort Laramie. The Black Hawk War is another example of Manifest Destiny causing conflict between Native Americans and settlers. As we expand west, there's really a couple things that the Native Americans can do. Give up land to the American settlers. Give up land and assimilate into American society. That means adopt American culture and American ways like English, Christianity, American style of dress and customs. Or you can refuse to do this and fight American expansion, which happens in the Black Hawk War. The Black Hawk War ends, like most conflicts over land, ends between the Native Americans and white settlers, with the United States government winning and forcibly removing the Native Americans from their land. The Treaty of Fort Laramie will be a temporary peace settlement between Native Americans out west. We're talking about right now the Wyoming, Colorado territory. The Treaty of Fort Laramie will, for a time, mark an agreement where the Native Americans are promised certain areas or settlements of land which Americans will stay off of. In return, Native Americans will promise not to attack any more settlers that are moving out west on the Oregons and Santa Fe trails. And last but not least, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. This is a treaty signed in 1848 that ends the Mexican-American War. we are able to get California and the New Mexico and Utah territories. California, as a result of the 1849 gold rush, will come in as a free state. And the debate over what to do with the rest of the Mexican cession, or the land that's ceded to us by Mexico, whether it be free or slave, will spark a controversy and debate that will lead us into the next section.